Morning.
Hello, how are you, Alex?
Doing all right. Kind of sleepy this morning, but otherwise pretty good.
I forget where are you based at these days? Are you
San Francisco.
you're up in San Francisco? Okay, cool. Mhm.
We've got an eighth solution.
We have eight now.
Yeah, I think Benji just opened up a new one.
Oh wow, okay, that's exciting. Although I guess numbers two, three, four, and five are all kind of out now. Is that accurate?
Yeah, two, three, four, five. Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's uh I think we just voted on one and six and seven.
So we have one, six, seven, and now eight, possibly.
Eight. And then there's a secret ninth option, which is I believe six plus seven.
Okay, which is not eight. Okay.
Not eight, different thing.
Okay. Mm,
We're running out of numbers.
yeah. Hi, Jeanette. Hey, Martin.
Hello. And letters for the criterias.
In order for the Nullability working group to continue, we have to submit an RFC to the numbers working group to invent new numbers.
Are counting in hexadecimal.
All right. Um, I'll go ahead and get us started since I think everybody's here. Stephen, we don't have you on the attendees list. Do you have a PR open?
I will add one here.
Okay. Great. Just to get us started, we're gonna go around and do intros. I'm Alex Riley. I'm here representing DoorDash. Stephen, you want to go next?
Hey, I'm Steven. I work with Netflix.
I'll go
We can
next.
go.
I'm Martin at Apollo. Uh, Janet, you want to go next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jeanette from Meta. And then Benji.
Hi folks, Benji from Graphile.
Great. So the agenda today, we have a meta evaluation of proposals. We have uh, a request parameter proposal from Benji, and then we have the Appendix C no propagate directive. Is that solution 8?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Cool, cool, cool. Do you want to kick us off, Jeanette?
Yeah. So basically I just posted this doc we've been working on internally for a while, which is just thinking about for each of the current proposals what it would look like to adopt internally at Meta. Um and yeah, I think a lot of it, so we were working on it before some of the solutions have like since been rejected. So I think a lot of the ones, like the one that would have been hardest for us to adopt, solution 5, I think it seems like the group has decided already to not move forward with. And then between the existing solutions, not including solution 8, because I haven't fully processed it yet, I think like all of them would be doable. I think, yeah, the main thing is I think some of the considerations at the top, I would love people's thoughts on, because I think they could be more broadly applicable to people who have like a similar GraphQL stack as us. But yeah, I think people can, unless there's like, sorry, I haven't been to many of these meetings. So if people don't have anything they want to talk about right now, it's more just like a call out to read it and either in the Discord or through like comments to let us know your thoughts.
Martin, I see you have a comment on here. Do you want to sort that out here?
Yeah, I'm processing and first of all, thank you so much for actually writing this. Like this is super helpful to have real life use cases at the scale of Meta. And if it's working for Meta, I think it's going to work for a lot of people. My comment was about solution number 5, which I was the champion for a while. And we rejected it because, well, you need all your clients to be updated, to be error-aware clients. And in some cases, you don't own the clients, and sometimes the clients can be in the wild for a very, very long time. And so you can never assume that all your clients have migrated. I think this was the main thing against solution number 5. But reading your comments, there's something I did not quite understand about model generation and specifically for Java and non-null safe languages. Because I was under the impression that for Java, it wouldn't be so much of an issue because everything is nullable. So if you start adding a bang, the only difference would be that, well, now it's non-null anymore, but if you have an error handling client, of course, or everything I say is if you have an error handling client, the model can be so that the field is never null. So it's even better, I think, for the clients, but it sounds like I'm missing something here.
Yes. So I think the main thing okay, so yes, I think you're right that in Java everything is sort of nullable. So the main thing is we wouldn't get an app build failure. So we would only get those app build failures for apps written in like null safe languages like Swift and Kotlin. So the app would build. It's just that then at runtime, if you end up getting an error in like a semantically non-null position, instead of changing that field to just be null, which is the existing behavior on the app, you would end up like null bubbling, if that makes sense. So like because it's or like the server can still send down null for that field with an error, and
Yes,
like, we
with
will
an
null
error.
propagate. And in theory, that happens rarely, so maybe that's fine, but it is a behavior change. And I guess at our scale, what
Yes.
we would want is no behavior change to start out, and then we can very slowly start introducing more null bubbling propagation. But to all of a sudden turn on null bubbling propagation everywhere would be scary because we don't know actually that these like errors are rare. Like in theory, I think if it is semantically non-null, these errors should be rare, but they could be very common, and we just don't know right now because we're always like presenting it as null, if that makes sense.
Yes. So just one thing is this whole number 5 proposal was about you start by evolving all your clients to be error-aware clients, so they would know how to react to a non-null field being actually null with an error. And only once all your clients have evolved, then you do the change. So it wouldn't break any of the app in production if, and that's a big if, I admit it's a big if you can make sure that all your clients are error aware first.
Yeah, so I think that's true. And it is basically just that at our scale, like making all of our clients error aware in a way that isn't perceived as like the app breaking more and like more data disappearing, would take like potentially years, which is why, or it would then take us years to fully adopt that proposal, where some of the other proposals like the like SDL change we could adopt relatively quickly and then slowly work on the like null propagation changes on the
Okay.
client. So yeah, I think that is correct. It's just that like the big if for us would probably take
Yes.
a long, long time. Yeah.
Yes, it's years, basically. Yep. Got it. Thanks. Out of curiosity, is Java for your Android app or something else?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think our Android app is like a combination of Kotlin and Java, I think across like all of our apps maybe. And then on iOS, it's like a combination of Objective-C and Swift.
Makes sense.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for putting that together. Does anybody else have anything they want to say about this? All right, cool.
So it looks like solution 1 and 6 would work, right? And so what are the next steps there? Like, so we just got solution 8, which we're going to talk about. But basically, my question is, how do you see this happening at Facebook? Like, if we were to say solution 6 is the way forward, is that something you could adopt at Meta?
I think so. Is solution, so sorry, I have to refresh my memory. Solution 6 is the semantic non-null directive, right?
Yes,
That we are
yes,
already using internally. So it is
yes.
essentially adopted currently.
But you're not using the introspection part, are you? Like,
That I don't know. Or sorry, I'm not familiar with introspection, but I guess
yeah.
our stack is like the SDL has the semantic nullability like in it, and then Relay has that directive available. So then as we're generating our models, we have the option to like use the semantic nullability directive to type our models. But without any changes to the consumer, it's like a no op.
Okay.
That's one of the main reasons that I was asking you the questions in the chat earlier. And from my understanding, like Facebook aren't using introspection for this. They're building a schema from implementation first. They're then printing it out as SDL, which means that they don't need to go through introspection in order to add those directives because they're just there in the schema anyway, so they can add them. And then they're then reading that SDL in with something like Relay Compiler, and then processing it from there. So they're not actually using the introspection capabilities. I'm sure you use introspection for some things, but not for this main flow that you're talking about, I guess. Actually, that's a good question that I'd love to know the answer to. Is there things that you can find out if there are things using introspection? Because this is another place where adopting these kind of changes may break existing clients, particularly Solution 7, I think, would break any existing tooling that uses introspection.
Yeah, I can definitely ask. I think I know essentially nothing about introspection, but there are people probably who work on the server side or on, I think I heard maybe something about graphical might know something. So yeah, I'll ask them and maybe either add that as a new discussion or like expand it to cover introspection. Yeah.
That would be amazing. And also, yeah, to echo Martin's point, thank you so much for doing this. This is like really, really valuable information.
Is there anything we can help with besides all the work that Benji has been doing to explicit and all the different solutions and everything? Like to make the adoption faster, or maybe not faster, but to make the discussion at least, because we're still in the discussion phase, but to help the discussion at Meta.
Um, I I'm not sure, or I guess um yeah, I'll get let me noodle on that. I think nothing comes to mind immediate. I think like, we all have somewhat limited time. So I like some of us
Yes,
have been trying to track the proposals and make sure like it's not something that's gonna take like years for us to adopt, because I think that would be a little disheartening. But other than that, I think yeah, so I think this doc was just our like, by the way, like if we did these proposals, it would make our lives really difficult internally at Meta, just if in case that is helpful to know. But
this is
we are
super
just
helpful.
one company that uses GraphQL, so it's just a case study.
Yeah, a big one. Thank you so much.
Cool, cool, cool. Benji, do you want to take it away for disabling error propagation, take 2?
Yeah, absolutely. So I already raised a pull request, which we discussed previously about disabling error propagation with a request parameter. And I think we already pretty much reached consensus that doing it with a request parameter was the right approach. That said, I had some reservations on a few of the things about the actual execution of that. And I wanted to indicate like a default error behavior through the schema itself, so that if, for example, you started a new schema, you could actually just say this new schema doesn't do error propagation, like out of the box. I don't think there's any real need for us to allow someone to not support error propagation, because really the only areas of the spec that changes is like one small area. And even for like GraphQL.js, it's like 5 lines of code, whether error propagation happens or not. All the errors get caught in this particular place, and then do they get rethrown or not is basically the question. So I think we'll support all of the modes. And my proposal at the moment is that we give the client the ability to say which mode they want. But if they don't give that, if they don't say which mode they want, then we'll just use the default. So, so the interesting thing, the big change about this versus my previous proposal is that this doesn't require us to add any information to the response. Previously, I was saying we would just include on error with every request. And then if you got on error back on the response, then you knew the server honored it. And if you didn't get it back on the response, then server doesn't support it. So you just treat it as if error propagation was still enabled, which is kind of weird and not ideal. So instead, I've proposed that we add a directive to introspection. So if you have, sorry, not a directive, a field to introspection. So if the default error behavior field exists on the schema, then that schema supports error behaviors, which means you can opt into no error propagation, you can have standard error propagation, or you can go into abort mode, which was quite interesting, that I think it was Shopify actually have like quite a use case for the abort mode as well. And certainly those one-off scripts that you write where like if an error happens, then you just stop, might as well stop on the server and not keep executing things on the server side. So these are all accounted for. So essentially, yeah, the idea is this: you include a on error with your request if you want to. If not, the default is used. You can find out what the default is from introspection. And that's it really. Like the rest of it is basically what we had before.
Cool stuff. There's maybe a timing issue because GraphQL Java and GraphQL JS both still have this directive, disable error propagation, but they haven't made a release yet. So none of that is released. If we are saying we are moving that direction, might be worth like changing the behavior right now before people even get a chance to try the directive one.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that I was keen that went out with an experimental part of its name. And I think that it wasn't wrong to do that. Like it does allow experimentation, which I think is really critical for this. But this actually, to me, this feels like a finished solution. Like it does the stuff we want. It's essentially allows you to do the solution 5 that you proposed, Martin.
Yes.
So
Which is
you
why
can
I'm
now
pushing
opt
that.
out of it. You can now opt out of it, and then what we do on top of that is a secondary concern of like, right, if you want to opt into this, then or more specifically, if you want to start using the true nullability in your schema, then if you've got legacy clients, you need a way of representing that. So that's the semantic nullability problem. But this is just turning off error propagation, which fixes like normalized caching woes and so much other stuff. So I think this is a really, really big first step. And paired with something like Relay or GraphQL or whatever, this really gets us like 80% of the way to where we want to be, I think. And certainly for new schemas as well. Like that's it. This is it. This is all you need if you're building a new schema today. We only need the other stuff if you've got legacy schemas. So my main aim for, go on.
I was going to say this is RFC 1, I think, proposal. We would need pull request for GraphQL JS.
Yeah, that
And
exists.
I think, okay, It's perfect. And people need to opt in. There's always this trick, right, where we can consider this still opt in because people need to put the directive in their schema, in their source schema, or is that pulled by default by GraphQL JS right now?
So I wrote the implementation for this today. The idea is there is a new built-in, no, I'm talking about the wrong solution. Sorry. Let me catch up with myself again.
So many
This
solutions.
isn't. So for this, the request parameter, there is no directive. It is just a request parameter of on error. And if you provide it, then the schema can support it. And theoretically, we can push this out in a minor release. So
It's
essentially, it's
always a
just another
chicken
thing.
and egg problem, you know. We need the implementation to move the spec forward, but we also need the feedback to move the spec forward. So it's always the same thing. I'm trying to think, how do we push this in GraphQL JS with a big warning sign that it's not completely RFC3 yet, it's not completely accepted yet, but I would still want it to be merged in GraphQL JS.
Yeah,
Is
we had a discussion about this before. Like it's a bit like HTTP headers. Like for a while you'd put X dash at the beginning of custom HTTP headers, and then they
yes.
were like, don't do that anymore. And we kind of had a similar thing with like when we think that something is like pretty much a finished solution and we just want to get results, we don't put experimental on it then because we want people to be able to take that and go forward, and we only want to make changes to it if we have to. So what I have done in the GraphQL JS implementation is I've just marked all of the fields in the TypeScript as experimental. So I've used the experimental tsdoc tag and also put the word experimental as like the first word in the documentation. But other than that, that's it. So essentially, when this becomes not experimental, all we do is just delete that word, delete that tag, and it hopefully no one has to change anything.
This is good.
I would love to, yeah, if you have feedback on like how this works, or if you think it should work something differently, then it would be ideal to get that out as soon as possible. But my aim is to add this to the working group agenda for tomorrow and see if we can get this to RFC2, which I think will give us a much more much stronger push to getting this just into the spec. I'll be honest, literally the only issue that I have with this as it's currently proposed is the word no propagate. It just doesn't feel ideal. But I haven't found a better replacement for it, and me and Martin have had some discussions about that on the on the spec pull request. So get involved with those, especially if you have better suggestions.
I'm really excited to see this move forward tomorrow, potentially. I'll try to give it a once over today if I have the time. But thanks for putting that together.
Okay,
Any more thoughts on
awesome.
the
So the only other thing I wanted to mention on this is yes, there is a directive, you're right. Because it's the default error propagation. Yeah, the default error propagation comes through from this, doesn't it? Yes. Oh my word, sorry. I did warn you I was going to be a bit out of it today. Yes, so there is a directive. You may add that to your schema. If you don't add it to your schema, we assume that you're in your default error propagation mode is propagate. If you do add it, then you need to, if you use a different default, you need to add the directive when you represent it in SDL. I have a second pull request to this that effectively tidies up the schema for that so that you don't actually have to include all of the operation definitions as well, which is nice. But theoretically, we can push this out into GraphQL JS because it won't even make any differences to the schema because the default is propagate. And so it won't need the directive in the schema. So you won't see it. Nothing will change, essentially. There is one observable change from this that I am aware of. And other than obviously being able to see that there is an extra field in introspection, and that's the introspection query itself now contains an additional new line. But that's just because I'm trying to fit to the style that they write the code in. But other than that, yeah, we should be able to merge it without any woes, I hope. Cool. Should I move on to the next one?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I've had a big think based on the working group that we had, the main spec working group from last month, and had to think about the various things that people were commenting on. And there's things like it should be indicating what it does with regard to errors rather than with regard to semantic nullability. I think Lee sort of said, my bad, he said, for like introducing that concept. There was also, like Jordan was saying, for example, that if we introduce new syntax for this, then it's going to be a lot of effort to get tooling to support that syntax, things like that. So that, and obviously all of the feedback that we've had about all of the different proposals up until this point, and also very much fueled by, I would say, the success of semantic non-null. Like semantic non-null has been picked up and is being used in lots of different places, even though it's not really specified, right? We just say it's this and it's got this parameter, done. And we don't really describe it any more than that. And we just have this like joint dream of what it should be. And I think one thing, the final thing is people wanted to, like when they want to mark something as non-nullable, even semantically non-nullable, they want to put the bang in there. So this effectively is a proposal for a new directive, no propagate, which is essentially semantic non-null, except it goes on to a bang character. So it effectively demotes the bang rather than promoting a unadorned. Now, one of the things I've done I've gone back to some of my earlier ideas on this. And one of the things that I've done is that I have made it so that if you run introspection in traditional mode, in propagate mode, then you won't see these new transitional non-nulls. So essentially, go back. So the no propagate directive applies to a field, and it looks at the non-null types in that field. And if the levels match, it will make them what we call transitional non-nulls, which I'm now saying is like a non-null variant. So previously in solution 1, we actually had a new type, which was called semantic non-null. So in introspection, it would be semantic non-null rather than non-null. With transitional non-null, we're doing it a bit more like one of. One of is actually just an input object with a like special property. So this is kind of the same, except we don't even expose that special property through introspection. We only expose it as on the field. So it looks like it's a directive, but internally it's a type property. And the advantage of that is we can just refer to it as like, if it's a transitional non-null, do this special thing, otherwise don't. The really key thing about this proposal is it's just an appendix, right? It's entirely optional. If you don't have legacy schema stuff, you don't need to implement it. So it's much like what we have for semantic non-null at the moment, which is like it's an external spec. It talks about how everything works. It tries to write it up in precise spec terms, and it also talks about how you would expose it through introspection. It's interesting because I don't think we actually have had anything like this before that has effectively said, add these fields to introspection. But this does, and I think it's the right decision. And essentially, I think this gets us all the benefits of semantic non-null with a bit more crispness and without the concerns of like having to maintain it in the main spec, which I think is one of the other things that people were concerned about with it being a transitional thing. Like, we don't want it in the spec forever, so let's put it in an appendix. I think that is a cleaner solve. Any thoughts?
Was this also added to the comparison document, or
No, I only wrote it up today and I haven't had time to do that.
okay?
Would that be a good, maybe a good like sub next step is just like add it officially as option 8, and then maybe just linking to this, and then for the meeting tomorrow, what would be the goal for tomorrow? Like, is it possible to have like eliminating more of the options, like narrow down our option set for tomorrow?
Well, one of the
Um,
things about this, I think, is that it's essentially like a mirror to Lee's latest one. So Lee's one is propagate error, and this is essentially the inverse of that. I think it's got a better migration story. Like, it's much more, you can adopt it much more incrementally, and you can also leave it much more incrementally if you want to as well. So I think that story is a bit better. There is some interesting challenges with it. So like Jeanette was saying, um, if you ignore directives, then these things now all look like they're non-null. And honestly, this what I've proposed here could be done basically the same with semantic non-null and just removing all the bangs. So I'm happy either way. I think the solution is basically the same for this. But what I would like to do ideally is to get Lee on board with using this side of a solution rather than the other side, because I think that the propagate error is going to be really hard for people to adopt. It's going to be like, it's a really big bang adoption story. And it also, I think, is quite problematic for public GraphQL APIs to adopt as well, which means that they have to do it through versioning. And I don't see the need for that. Like, I think we can just do the inverse of it and just get it out smoothly for everyone. So if we can eliminate that in favor of this, I think that would be compelling. And as you can see from the pull request, this isn't like this isn't scattered all over the spec. It is like one file. It's 129 lines of markdown. It's not very much at all. So yeah, if you folks could read over this, and let me know whether you're on board with it before the meeting tomorrow, I think that would be really good, because then we can decide how we want to present it at the working group.
My only feedback from a cursory look at glance at it is naming. Like, no propagate really, it messes up with my brain. Like, I have a negation and I have to think about propagation, and it's really hard for me to have a mental model of what no propagate means. So I probably won't suggest null here, but maybe something like local errors or something like this. I don't know.
Benji, this is your current preferred solution. This is your highest ranked one.
Solution 1 is still my preferred solution. But like, it's very clearly, I mean, Lee said he would rather see no solution than see a solution 1, which was interesting for me. So I understand that it's not a universal opinion.
I wonder if that will if he'll temper on that. Um, yeah, I guess I want to know more about the arguments against solution one were basically like we want this to be somewhat difficult to use because it's kind of an undesirable thing, I guess. But you didn't find those arguments compelling.
I think one of the arguments was essentially, if we introduce new syntax, then we have to update all the tooling to understand the new syntax, which I don't find compelling because you only need one tool, which I've already written, right? Semantic to nullable or semantic to strict. It's just a command that takes an SDL that supports this and turns it back into the old syntax. So you literally, it's really not that big a concern. Another issue on the syntax front was we don't want to add a piece of syntax permanently to the GraphQL specification just to support something that is transitional, which I understand where people are coming from. But again, I don't find that particularly compelling because, for example, like Meta are going to have stuff that they've released recently that's probably going to be alive for, you know, a decade. So I think it's okay for that to use, you know, a bit of syntax and for us to acknowledge that in the history. I mean, if we add this as a appendix, that appendix is going to live forever. I also think that the syntax in general on all of these has been hated so much that we wouldn't want to use that syntax for anything else. So it's not like we're preserving option value, because nothing else would want to use that anyway. So, but yeah, that was one of the arguments. Yeah, I think generally the arguments were if it's transitional, let's not use syntax for it. So option 6 then I saw as an alternative, but one of the main issues that I have with that and with this latest solution, to be honest, is this is clearly, to me, this is clearly a property of the type. Like it is a property of the non-null, whether it propagates or not is a type property, and that's how the spec handles it currently. It's not a field property because like it matters like inside nested lists inside of the field, and you do need to be able to model those if you want to support something. In fact, Jeanette, can you do you have various, maybe you don't because like Facebook tends to do things nullable. But do you have situations where you have either a non-nullable list of nullable things or a nullable list of non-nullable things?
Okay, I was just looking at this. For reason or not necessarily good reasons, what we currently support is I think non-null, or I think we only really support non-nullable lists of non-nullable items. We definitely don't support nullable items within lists. I think one reason for that is like on iOS, we don't want to wrap all our like values in like a wrapper to be able to express nullability for like scalars, for example. And then I think the no nullable listing is actually something we were just discussing. Like there's no good reason why we don't support nullable lists. Like we definitely could. Like the outer list, that list itself being nullable, is fine.
So one of the things, and it might be because of obviously Lee's history from coming from Facebook and stuff, is Lee only, I think, sees value in a nullable list of nullable items and a non-nullable list of non-nullable items. So his propagate error directive only allows for those two, and it explicitly does not have the levels functionality that we have on semantic non-null, for example. But I don't think that is sufficient for people to be able to migrate to use that, because it either means that they need to upgrade the thing to completely non-nullable, or they need to do a breaking change where they go back to completely nullable, neither of which are necessarily the right solution for them for legacy clients. So yeah, to me, it's very much the fact that we have levels shows to me that it is a property of the type. It's not really a field directive, but there was so much pushback on syntax. Solution 6 and now solution 8 are essentially this, which is to try and appease the aesthetics. But honestly, solution 1 is still, to me, clearly the better solution. Not necessarily the asterisk symbol. I'd be happy with a different symbol. I'm actually quite a fan of interrobang, like the exclamation mark, question mark. But
Got it. What do people think prevented us from coalescing around a single solution at the last working group meeting?
Sorry, what do you mean you want us to
Yeah,
have
why
less
why couldn't
solutions?
we reach a single, why couldn't we all agree on a single solution at the last working group meeting?
Yes.
Where was the disconnect?
in my opinion, I think it was because essentially the existing solutions were presented quite quickly, and then Lee got to explain his
Yes.
one. So suddenly the inventor of GraphQL is there saying, this is what I think is the right solution. And I think that's quite compelling in itself, even if you haven't studied the actual solution and what its ramifications are. I think also the people that were trying to make those decisions haven't thought about these problems necessarily as much as we haven't thought of all the edge cases or really thought what the migration flow is gonna feel like. So I think they're not necessarily best placed to take like a vote on this, because you can't be introduced to something and then be asked to vote on it 10 minutes later. It's very hard to have an informed opinion in that kind of situation.
I
Got
think
it.
now that there's fewer proposals, that might make it easier for people. I think like last working group meeting, there were like 6, which yeah, I think if the first time you were looking at it was in that meeting, was probably a little overwhelming. Whereas now I feel like I guess Benji just introduced a new one, but it feels like we're coalescing to like fewer solutions now.
I haven't written an implementation for this one for solution 8, but I'd be interested to know if people think it's worth writing up basically the same solution, but with semantic non-null. Because as I say, I think it's just a case of like moving a few exclamation points around and renaming a few things. I don't want to muddy the water, which is why I've not done that. Like, I would rather that we move to I'm finding it hard to tell what the broader group will find compelling on this. And honestly, I think any solution is better than no solution, because I want to move to the future where we have errors handled on the client and we represent true nullability in the schema. Like, that to me is the future of GraphQL, and I want to get there, and I want to get there soon. And things like, sorry, Martin, but things like solution 5, which are saying you move all your clients to be error handling clients, and then you can turn this feature on, means that no one is reaping that like dopamine hit straight away, right? You have to do all the work before you can get the dopamine hit. And I want something where you can
All
basically
the new
go,
people get it, but not
right,
the
yeah,
existing ones.
absolutely.
It's always the same thing, you know,
Exactly.
the new hires get the best laptops.
Exactly. But yeah, I want to get to the point where like you're just like, oh, this field in my client is like, I've got these null checks in like 8 different pages here, and you just say to the dev, can you just make this specific field, can you make that semantically non-null? And they're like, yeah, done. And that's it. All those null checks go away like instantly. And you just do that on the one field, right? You just do that on that one pain point. You don't have to migrate all of your microservices to be consistent with each other and all this other stuff. You just, this one place. And that's what I find compelling for this. And I don't really care whether it's done with a directive or a syntax. The syntax feels more natural to me. It feels like it models the solution better. But I'm happy with 1, I'm happy with 6, I'm happy with 8, any of them. I just want the group to rally around one of them. And I think our group did rally around 1. And then we're a bit surprised that the rest of the group were like, no. So yeah, I'm not sure how to solve that, other than education.
So which are the candidates we have right now? So 1, 6, 8. That's
7 is
mostly
still on
it.
the table, I believe.
Which one?
7.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say. We still need But looks like only Lee is backing 7.
Yeah. But maybe with this,
No,
we can consolidate by after tomorrow on one of 7
Yeah.
or 8.
So it gives
but
4
there
solution,
was,
which is not too bad.
to be fair, there is another solution which isn't written up, and that is the 6+7 solution that was somehow proposed in the middle of the last
Oh,
working group.
yes.
And I have no idea what that looks like, but it just seems overly complex to me, and I don't really understand the motivation behind it. But people were like, "Oh yeah, that sounds great." And I was, why? But I would love someone to write that up and actually make a compelling story behind it because I didn't understand it. But yeah, I think there was a fair amount of support for Solution 7 during that last working group. I know, like, for example, Michael Stabe looked at it and was quite keen on it. But again, it was the first time he'd seen it, really, I think. So
Yeah, the ranked choice vote ended up tied between 6 and 7.
So on the this proposal number 8, I really like that it is like looking towards the future state by being an appendix, and also focusing on the problem of legacy clients, because that is looking like selfishly from the Netflix perspective. There's a lot of differences from how we implement GraphQL from Facebook, but one thing we have in common is the long-lived legacy clients that, realistically, we have mobile apps that we have to consider them, roughly forever. They're going to be on the field, a decade maybe.
I have
So
a question
yeah,
on
I
that
like that.
front, actually, to both you, Stephen, and Jeanette. Lee basically said that clients shouldn't be doing introspection, is basically what he said. Now, that's not something that I personally subscribe to. I don't think that's right. And I think if that was right, why have we even got the the dunder type field in introspection where you can look up a specific type? If you're only going to do it as part of tooling, you might as well just introspect the whole schema, do the thing. If you're doing it at runtime, actually being able to narrow down and look into a thing is actually really important. And it's a feature that I use, like for looking at, for example, the list of enum values, which is helpful when you want to populate a dropdown and don't want to have to rewrite that code every time the schema changes or regenerate it or whatever. And there are other systems that do this. For example, like React admin, like will look at a GraphQL schema and will then generate, forms or reports or whatever from it. So there, in my opinion, there definitely is tooling that does introspection that is deployed somewhere. I would love to hear from you folks whether there are things like legacy tooling in your infrastructure that if a change was made that broke introspection, would cause you pain to migrate to.
I think, or from what I know, I guess for our like shipped clients, like I think they have no awareness of the schema, I guess. Or they have our generated models that are generated based off the schema, and they like views are like accessing fields off these models. But like, or I guess like for us at least, the danger to ship clients would be if we changed like interpretation of like executable document like syntax, because like executable documents live forever because they live with the build. But I think we're all in agreement that we're not going to do that. So at least for Meta, I think as long as we're not doing that, it's fine. And then I think there is no use of, as far as I'm aware, I've asked and I haven't heard back from the people who would know, but I think there's no use of introspection in like production clients, um, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, and for us, I mean, we have a lot of clients, but the ones that we're concerned about in terms of like legacy are the consumer ones, the one that's in the Netflix app on your phone. And so for those, they don't have access to introspection at runtime. So for those clients, it's only at build time that they have access to introspection. So that so that wouldn't really be a breaking concern except for tooling, developer tooling, and things that we have access to make changes to update.
And it's really the developer tooling stuff that I'm thinking, like the internal admin panels that you might make for someone, even, regular stuff like compiling codes or pipelines or whatever. Do you have any of those that exist that use introspection that would be a fair amount of effort to update? Like I'm thinking maybe if you're doing Android builds for a really old version of Android and it's quite like painful to update, or you've got stuff that's still written in Objective-C and no one writes to Objective-C anymore, so it would be a pain to move that over, or anything like that kind of stuff. No, fair enough.
I've asked our server folks and they just haven't responded to me. But as soon as I know, I'll put something, or yeah, I'll get back.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, it would probably be, just kind of the long tail of tools that developers use, like, I don't know, like paw or something, or maybe like a version of, old version of graphical that's built into some sort of tool, um, or IDE plugins, like, is the IntelliJ GraphQL plugin going to get updated to, to reflect the new, thing. But for the most part, we do, rely on at least an open source core that would come down to, like eventually the graphical repository, or like a handful of other open source repositories. Um, so it's I think it would be some level of work, but uh, definitely tractable.
Okay, awesome. Great examples. Thank you.
Let's talk strategy for tomorrow. Do we want to take another stab at coalescing around a solution? There's almost nothing on the agenda right now. We could hog a 50-minute block if we wanted to.
I think if we can land the request parameter, the on error, and if that's the only thing we land before September, that would be a massive step forward nonetheless, I think. So I think we should rally around that and try and push that forward. On the then encouraging people to, move over to using true nullability in their schemas front, I am strategy-wise, I think 1 is still an interesting solution. It's still my preferred solution. 6 and 8 are essentially, in my mind, somewhat equivalent. So I would like to determine from you folks which of those you think is better. And I'm tempted to go with semantic non-null because it's already in use in a bunch of places, and I'm hoping that essentially this document just writes up what they already do, but in spec terms. Obviously, it's slightly different because it's no propagate and it works on strict non-nulls, but broadly similar. But I thought that the no propagate might be a more convincing mirror to the complaints that were essentially it's non-null, we want to add a bang on it, which was one of the things. And to Lee's point that essentially he feels like it should relate to the errors because it's the errors that are changing rather than the nullability. And so I thought that this current solution 8 that I'm proposing might possibly have more chance of convincing Lee.
Do you want to showcase it tomorrow and see what he says?
I'm happy to do so. And it is the kind of thing that like people could potentially read on the call. It's not a huge amount of stuff. Maybe
So
just
we
to
make
test the water.
we make it focused about one request parameter, we want that in, and two, new solution 8, and see what people think of it.
So briefly, between solution 6 and 8, besides the name of the directive, what's the key difference?
I understand
So
it as conceptual. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Benji.
I was just going to say solution 6 isn't actually very well defined. We talk about it in terms of like, this means semantic non-null, and we know
Yeah.
that it essentially means null only on error, but it's not defined how you get that information through introspection, for example. It's not very well actually defined. It's not
Okay.
clear whether it's a type variant or whether it's a field property. There aren't really any spec edits written up for it. So 6 is kind of really, really fluid. But if we treat 6 in the way that I interpret it, then 6 and 8 are very similar. The main difference is that 8 would affect strict non-null types only and has no impact on nullable types. One of the interesting things that Jeanette said earlier is that the semantic non-null that they also add to the kills parent on exception fields as well, which is interesting to me. You can do the same thing with no propagate, but it essentially gets ignored on nullables because nullables don't propagate anyway. But yeah, I think it is. I'm going to just scan over it again, but I think it is broadly the same.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So I see that as kind of kind of like a further clarification, evolution of number 6 for the most part. Because I was thinking of, like the naming, and so I added a comment on a few names and just semantic, uh, which, and so makes it look very similar to option 6 with just the name change. But maybe that's okay if it really is, uh, at heart the same thing, but taking it a step further to the spec edits and some of the details. And I do, I think that can make sense. Just go ahead and have the bang, so it only applies on types that have the bang. Um,
You've made me think that maybe a better name for the directive might literally be the word transitional.
So, okay. So goals for the working group meeting, we're gonna present on the request parameter. We're gonna focus up on that. Are you going to try to get Lee to drop 8? No. No, drop 7 in favor of 8? Is that the idea?
I would like us to drop solution 7. Like I'm not a fan of that solution.
And then it honestly seems like 8 somewhat supersedes 6. So perhaps we can drop that as well, maybe. And then that would leave us with 2 viable solutions, 1 and 8.
I guess, sorry, for solution 8 and 6 being similar, I guess like from like our perspective, or like I guess like solution 8, you are using the like existing syntax to now annotate semantic non-null. So then I guess from our perspective, I would interpret that as like changing the meaning of existing syntax, whereas solution 6 is like purely a new directive. So I guess I would say to me they feel very different, but maybe I'm missing some like subtlety around like how they are the same.
So the interesting thing there is it's because you operate in SDL. And if you operated through introspection, then all of your existing usage would be using the existing propagate method, which means it would not see the transitional non-null and it would become nullable for it. So all your existing tooling, if it did introspection, would not see any difference. But you're using and to be fair, this comes back to a couple years back when I was chatting with Jordan, and essentially what we were realizing is essentially we need two schemas. We need a schema that uses true nullability for new clients, and we need a schema that uses some the traditional nullability for the legacy clients. And this one's got more bangs in, but we couldn't like mesh them together. And what we've tried to do with these solutions is to mesh them together in terms of like SDL. But the primary aim from my point of view for that is not for consumers at all. And this is really, really important. It's not for consumers, it's just for the people writing the schema, which for you folks doesn't matter. So I would say that the thing that you should do is at the moment, you build your schema implementation first, and then you write out an SDL file. I think you should write out two SDL files. You should write one that uses bangs in more places and one that uses not the bangs. And that's it. You just should work on those, all using traditional syntax, none of them with these special directives. And then all your existing legacy tooling, you just have it consume the old version. And all your new stuff, you have it consume the new version. And that's great. And we've already got tooling to do that for you. Like as I said before, the semantic, it's called GraphQL sock is the library, semantic to null and semantic to strict. But essentially, if you do that in terms of SDL, then you don't have this problem. And solution 1, solution 6, and solution 8 all produce exactly the same two versions of the schema if you do that.
Okay, I will sign up. I will do you want to do the parameter agenda item, Benji?
Yes, the on error. Yes, I'll add that to the agenda.
Cool.
I can also add the transitional non-null, which I'll add a bit later in the meeting. But I don't know I don't know what we want to factor in terms of feedback, because obviously I only wrote it up today and you folks are still digesting it, which is fair enough.
Yeah. And I will
Do we want to get the wording tighter before we bring it to the main working group is essentially what I'm saying.
for which one?
For the transitional non-null appendix,
Mm-hmm.
do we want to present it and say, we've got this idea, we're going to do the appendix, the words, the names of things aren't fully decided on yet, but here's the general principle? Or do we want to decide on the words, decide on the fact that it's going to be an at transitional or an at soft or whatever directive before we then present it to the main working group? Because honestly, first impressions matter.
I'll leave that up to you, I guess. I'll leave that up to you. I think yeah, the focus tomorrow is going to be on the request parameter. So yeah, I'll leave that up to you. Okay.
We can have
Cool.
the naming discussion on the request parameter, and that will maybe guide the other naming discussion.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. I gotta go, but thank you all for coming. This was helpful. Appreciate it. And thanks for those of y'all that put in some work today. Take care. See you tomorrow.
Thanks, everyone.